For the longest time in neuroscience research, the brain was thought to be fixed, unable to change. It was conventional wisdom that the brain was like a glorified machine. While it was able to do extraordinary things, it was hardwired and unlikely to recover from critical damage. That after childhood, the brain only changed when it began declining and aging. So those who were born with brain or mental limitations or sustained brain damage later on in life were thought to be disabled forever, which I think also brought rise to the disability injustices around the world. The sense that those who were born less able than the average person were a burden to society. It wasn't until the late 1960s that a series of discoveries revealed that the brain actually can change and form new connection pathways with different experiences and activities. For example, London taxi drivers were found to have larger hippocampuses, a brain area specializing in synthesizing complex spatial information. And professional musicians were found that they had larger gray matter volumes in areas involved in playing music. This phenomenon was later to be known as neuroplasticity. Its potential started to fascinate me when I was involved in a research project in the junior year of high school where I was investigating an electrical tongue stimulation device to help with this brain rewiring. It is used primarily on individuals with limited motor ability due to things like traumatic brain injury and multiple sclerosis. And what we've been seeing so far is that by combining this device with physiotherapy, there has been dramatic improvements in a person's gait and balance. Not only that, people have seen improvements in things like cognitive function, overall mood, memory, and sleep. We've also been seeing these changes on EEG brain scans, which measures a brain's electrical activity. So we would see things like reaction speed go faster or greater spans of attention. So we leverage the power of neuroplasticity, amazing changes can occur for the brain health of individuals. But that made me wonder, what does that mean for society as a whole? Because neuroplasticity can go both ways. It means that negative experiences can also trigger harm and damage to the brain. It means that our brains are vulnerable to outside influences like social systems and behaviors. Often when we think about social issues and social change, we look externally to see what we can fix. But what if there's a way that we can look internally to see what the changes in our brains can tell us about the social systems and policies we have in place? Last year, I had the opportunity to work with a foster care organization to support a group of youth transitioning out of foster care. It was during Christmas, a time when I thought was a pretty relaxing and happy time. But I didn't realize that for these youth, Christmas is one of their worst nightmares. It is a time when they feel the most fragile and lonely. During other times of the year, other than having a lack of emotional support, many do not have the resources to afford a social life or a proper education. And all of these little things add up. There's actually been studies that show that over 50% of the homeless population in Canada were once in the foster care system. Now, why is this? Well, the brain is the most moldable during childhood. And when you experience all these emotional stressors like having to move in and out of care homes all the time, while the brain is actively developing, there could be significant impacts on a brain's physical wiring and structure, making kids who have grown up in the foster care system much more likely to be less mature, less rational, and less ready for the real world. Yet what we're doing right now is cutting kids off of these services right at their 19th birthday, leaving them alone to fend for themselves. So if we want to see these issues like poverty rates and unemployment rates go down, then maybe a good place to look is how we can change the foster care system for the better. Let's look at another example, the criminal justice system. Interestingly enough, those who have committed a crime in their lives all have something in common, something about their brains. It turns out that the criminal mind typically has lower amygdala volumes, an area of the brain controlling emotional response. So a lower amygdala volume is often linked to things like aggressiveness, violence, and psychopathic traits. Building on this further, Dr. Kent Keel and his team recruited over 1,000 male participants aged 16 to 65, measuring the gray matter volumes in their brain. And what they were able to do is that by combining this information with brain age and psychological measures like impulse control and substance use, they were able to accurately predict whether someone would be rearrested in the future in most cases. So if we know that our brain structure can be linked to recidivism, what can be done? Well, our current criminal justice system relies heavily on retribution, punishing criminals by throwing them in jail for extended periods of time. The thing is, though, solitary confinement can make this brain damage even worse. Experiencing stress and trauma on a persistent basis can prompt the brain to respond differently, causing criminals to be worse off than they were before they entered. So, through the lens of neuroscience, it becomes clear that what we're doing right now is not the right approach if we want to decrease the rates of crime. Now, I'm not saying we should all walk around scanning people's brains to analyze every world problem, but it can provide us with a clear explanation as to why some of our systems aren't working the way we want them to. It can highlight the flaws and point out the policies that need to change. And when we look at these big issues like brain and mental health, we often try to fix what's happening on an individual level, when it's the environments and systems that are influencing how we think, act, and ultimately how we're constructed and wired biologically. While there's no one-size-fits-all approach to these issues, what we do know is that the brain has the power to change for the better. We can start by advocating for things like better supports for children when they're at a vulnerable age, and rehabilitation for criminals to promote healing and empathy. This approach can also be applied to many other issues. Like, how can we design better educational environments to accommodate for the neurodiverse? How can we design better urban architecture to promote greater mental well-being? And maybe the most relevant of them all right now, how can we use neuroscience research to better inform our decisions for COVID-19 safety policies in a way that takes into consideration our natural psychological tendencies and mental health? Now, I don't have all the answers to these questions, but I will say this. For the brain to function properly, neurons must work together to fire in unison. They must fire together to strengthen existing neurons and form new connections. And similarly, as individual members of society, we must come together to collaborate and lift each other up. That is the only way we're going to make a spark, a signal amidst the world's chaos and noise. This means, in order to tackle these complex problems, we need people from different backgrounds working together. Neuroscientists, engineers, policymakers, artists, you name it. We need to bring together all these different perspectives so that we can highlight previous shortcomings and blind spots. We need to get out into the community more. Volunteer your time to understand what it's like to be marginalized and face issues that we don't normally face. How are we creating environments that do and don't work? And lastly, we need to get rid of the mindset that people can't change, particularly those with mental or physical disabilities, those who are impoverished, and those who were previously incarcerated. Because we know from the power of neuroplasticity that if we establish the right systems, implement the right policies, and give these people the right opportunities and faith. They too can rise to meet us at the top. Thank you.